Loving the wife is key, and it's never easy. It will take us forever to learn, just as Christ loved the church. And as a father, what I learned is that as men, as fathers, we need to initiate. Just like God the Father, He creates and initiates. Yeah, He creates and initiates. So you're always looking for opportunities to create and initiate. You are the source, so you are the life giver. So imagine if you are the source, all life comes from the source. So if the source is not initiating, down the line, the rest of the loved ones under your care, under your charge, will not receive it. Yeah, so it's continually asking ourselves, downloading from God, what I should do and what I should not do. It's easy for me to turn to hobbies and vices and especially when the kids grow older, you find that you have a bit more time. So that's when the heart of reaching out is so important. Always, it's for me, I thank God that He's given me a heart to reach out to other men, even younger men. In recent years, I've been more convicted to reach out to younger men. For many years, I've been reaching out to fathers, but we start to see that many fathers are struggling because when they become husbands and fathers, they realize that they have to backtrack to where they were to understand their manhood. So God has led many younger men to my midst to see that they are crying out to understand what manhood means to them before they could even seek out the right relationship to settle down and become a husband and subsequently become a father. Yeah, so it's really rejecting passivity, accepting our responsibility, leading courageously, and to invest eternally. Yeah, they're all very, very tall order to achieve. So it constantly reminds me to seek out and to understand what it means day to day.
In today's context, I think couples would prefer a shared parenting kind of thing, shared responsibility and shared authority. So that's why I use the metaphor of a beach volleyball team where there are only two players and they form a team, and they are trained together, they practice together, they support one another, and they bring their own unique abilities and strengths to the team to enhance, the performance of the team. And another very important aspect of the beach volleyball team is that, unlike the 6-player volleyball team, there are no substitutions. These two players play throughout the game from start to finish, and I think that was a very pertinent point about parenting, right? That mothers and fathers, the biological mothers and fathers, needs to be mothers and fathers for life. Okay, so I think I totally understand this thing about men of the house because there needs to be a leader, right? Okay, but I think there is a very thin line, and it's easy to cross where we go into again, becoming a dictator and becoming very controlling and things like that. So while I believe that, yes, a man can be, in a sense, have the final say, but it's also very important for him to be very open to the opinions, points of view of his partner, like the wife. And I think there's a very important place where he shares the power. So he may be, he has the deciding vote. But if he's open to listen and even to be able to be willing to share the power with his wife, who is his partner for life, all right, in this parenting team as well, then I believe everything will work out very well. Okay, so I think that's the key there, willingness to share power. Because if you're not willing to share, then human beings being human beings, all right, there will be a power struggle. So we don't want a power struggle, right? So share it. Then you will avoid a power struggle at home.
father left my mom and myself when I was 1 or before I was 1. I actually grew up in a big family. We stayed in a big house in Katong, and my mom had 10 siblings. So as such, my house was always filled with people. But I guess because there wasn't a father around to protect me, to watch over me, I get bullied all the time. And growing up in that sort of environment has taught me that violence could settle everything. Okay. That being said, when I was a teenager, I was a very violent person. Very violent person. You can imagine there are 7 days to a week. The most I ever fought in 1 week was 9 times. And it wasn't just a one-on-one fight, it was a full-blown gang fight. Yeah. So in my mind, violence was the key to settle any problems that I have. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or wrong. Now that I'm older and I would like to say wiser, I knew how wrong my thinking was. But back then, this was the environment that I grew up in, right? So, yeah, that was my belief back then. I was a very angry child. I was a very angry teen. But I also believed that if my father was around, things would be very different. Things would be very different.
I think there's a whole range of characteristics, right? And the sensitive boys definitely have a different gift from the father. Yeah, they can actually end up having a gift of evangelism or even being a gift of a prophet. I'm talking about spiritual gifts. Yeah, because they're so sensitive to their atmosphere, they're so sensitive to other people's emotions. But when they're young, they don't know what to do with it. So we have our youngest one who is very sensitive, very emotional. That's why he's very anxious. But interestingly, he was actually very confident for a period. He was reaching out to others, even in his own little way, when he was like 9 and 10 years old. But somehow at the age of 11, he just, everything just was too unbearable for him. He was seeing how teachers were too fierce, and then he would be empathizing on other people's behalf, things like that. So I think all those emotions were really just too much for his little soul to bear. Yeah, so I think as fathers, it's important not to belittle the emotions of your sons, especially if you are not the emotional type. You are just the very hardcore, task-oriented, feelings are just sad, happy, angry, that's all, learn emotions from your son. Start to ask him questions about what's bothering him, and see that it is true how God is leading him to sense things in the world that is actually going to be his gifting and his ministry in the future as well. Yeah, so I think when you harness that is also masculinity, because masculinity is not just about like a macho man or like being a hero or being muscular or something, but to be strong in the gifts that God has given you, and to be able to act in those gifts with the confidence that you have and that dependence on God. Yeah.